According to NHL insiders, there appears to be a lot of interest in Rangers defenseman Tony DeAngelo. So what are the teams that are inquiring and what a deal might look like? We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, the Tony DeAngelo situation continues to evolve here, and NHL insiders, including Darren Dreger, Bob McKenzie, and others, are indicating that there are several teams actually expressing some pretty serious interest, and it might not be too long before a deal gets completed. Now, at this stage of the game, it's not really fair to say that a deal is imminent, but I wanted to take a look today at the teams that are being mentioned, that are inquiring, doing their due diligence to see what kind of makes sense and what a deal might look like. Now, there's 4 teams reportedly in the mix on Tony DeAngelo. Of course, like I said, they're early stages. They're kind of kicking tires, talking it over, having discussions with the Rangers, doing their due diligence, deciding, A, do they want to take this player on, and B, what's the deal going to look like? And we'll see here what happens next. Now, there is another possibility that the Rangers could decide just to let him sit at home for the rest of the year and do a buyout after the season. Now, because he's still a restricted free agent and hasn't built up enough seniority, a buyout on that kind of contract is much cheaper than if somebody signed as a UFA and they're older and have more years of experience. Now, on this kind of contract, a buyout would only be 1/3 of the money over twice the time instead of 2/3. So they would only end up with a cap hit of next year of $300K and the year after of $800K if they bought Tony out after this season. So let's just say, for example, they don't trade him. They can't find a deal that works. They let him stay the rest of the season at home. They pay him his money. But then after that, they do a buyout. He becomes a free agent. And they really don't end up with a whole lot of a bad cap situation. Next year, instead of having a 4.8, they'd only have 300, so they get $4.5 million back in space next year. But then a year after, they have some dead space of $800,000. So, it's not ideal, but it's certainly, potentially a better scenario than some alternatives might be. Now, there were reports as well indicating that the Rangers were not really believed to be all that interested in retaining a big chunk of salary or taking back a bad contract, and I want to discuss the aspect of that deal here as well. Now, I'm not entirely convinced at this point that they wouldn't be willing to do some of that to some degree, but at the end of the day, the scenario where they take a contract or retain has to put them in a better situation than if they do a buyout at the end of the year. So they have that leverage over teams right now. If teams are saying retain 50%, well, they got this year and next, they're going to say, well, we don't want to do that because, we're going to buy them out. And it's a better situation for us. Unless they want to offer a really interesting and intriguing asset, then it's not going to happen. So the 4 teams that Bob McKenzie has mentioned here as being in the mix right now, we have a couple of teams from Southern California with the Los Angeles Kings, as well as the Anaheim Ducks, and then we also have the Calgary Flames and the Detroit Red Wings. Now, I know there were some people mentioning the Vancouver Canucks as well. I don't really think they're in the mix right now. They could use a guy like him to some degree. But at the end of the day, right now, they're not being mentioned. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a quick look here at each team's blue line and discuss what kind of a fit he would be, and then what kind of contract or what kind of a asset going back the other way would it take to kind of satisfy what the Rangers are looking at. Now, that's first up. Take a look at the Calgary Flames. They're a team that's been mentioned quite a bit. If you look at their blue line, obviously you got Mark Giordano. You have Noah Hannafin back there. You have Rasmus Anderson. They obviously have Oliver Shillington, who's on the taxi squad as a young guy looking for some more opportunity as well. They have a decent blue line. They just brought back Nestorov as well. The blue line for the Flames has actually been doing decently. So, they don't have a ton of money invested in it, and they're doing well. So from a fit perspective, I'm not really sure there's a terrific fit. Now, in the case of what would go back the other way, as I mentioned, for the Rangers, they probably don't want to retain too much for too long. So ideally, if they take a contract back, it would have to be somebody who's expiring after this season so that they only have them on for that year and that's it. So it'll be, the year after when they have Tony, if they did the buyout, it would be better if they didn't have to do that. So looking at the Flames roster, they don't really have a bad contract that only has a year left on it, that they're in the final year. So obviously, the Flames might not be crazy with the Lucic contract, for what he makes, but still, like, there's too much term left on that. That's not going to work. The Rangers aren't going to want to do something like that. They don't really have a defenseman there that's, glaringly open right now to want to move. They have a decent guy like Shillington on the taxi squad already. So to me, even though the Flames are being mentioned, I don't really see a fit that way. I mean, I know they have forward Sam Bennett that's been mentioned in trade talk that he wants to trade. But still, I don't really know if they're going to want to do that from the Calgary side of things. I know Calgary is likely going to have to move him based on his wishes, but, I'm not really sure that them and the Rangers really make a good swap there for Tony DeAngelo. But I guess you never know. But I just, at this point, don't really see it being a terrific fit. Now, if you look at the Detroit Red Wings, for example, the Red Wings are a team with a little bit more cap space. They have some flexibility, so they certainly have some options here. Another link to DeAngelo and the Red Wings would be that GM Steve Yzerman, former GM in Tampa, they're the ones that drafted DeAngelo in the first round in his draft year, so Steve Yzerman would have been heavily involved with that. He's also the guy who moved him relatively quick out of the organization to the Coyotes. Now, of course, I know Yzerman was interviewed after drafting DeAngelo, and he basically said, he was 18 years old, did some things in junior that, may not be proud of or whatever, but they're hoping he can mature and become the player they hope he can be and kind of move past all that, and we're willing to give him a chance. So Yzerman's already been down the road of going through that phase with him. I'm not really sure he's going to want to take that on again. But just for, purposes here, let's take a quick look at their blue line. And you'll see a name that kind of sticks out maybe as being a swap, which is kind of funny in a way because he hasn't been in Detroit that long, but that's Mark Stahl. Now, Stahl's cap hit, of course, isn't really all that attractive. But right now, the Rangers might rather have kept Mark Stahl than deal the DeAngelo drama off the ice. I mean, and he's in his final year of his contract. There could be some salary retained on either side to kind of even things out. Maybe that's a scenario the Rangers would consider. I mean, I don't really think they want Mark Stahl back, but if Detroit insisted on it to get DeAngelo, maybe they would do it. I mean, again, I don't think that's a deal that's overly likely, but just looking at the roster on what Detroit could kind of convince the Rangers to take off their hands to make it work would possibly be that. I mean, obviously they have DeKaiser, they have Nemeth, they have Ronick. The Red Wings could use DeAngelo. If you look at that blue line on the screen, there's room there that he could be a fit and be quite helpful in helping move the puck and generating some offense. So from that perspective, there's a fit. Salary cap space-wise, there's a fit. There's familiarity with Yzerman, knowing what he's getting here in the player because he's been on the road before, but he also traded him before, so that tells me that maybe not so likely. I would say the Red Wings here would be a definite maybe, but I'm not really sure we can say that they'd be the leading contenders out of this group. Now, let's look at the Los Angeles Kings. Now, the Kings are a team that's been rebuilding for a while, have a really deep group of prospects. Hard to say exactly what they would want to give up for getting a guy like DeAngelo, but they are clearly in the mix here. If you look at their blue line, obviously led by Drew Doughty, there's certainly a spot here that you could create for having DeAngelo on this team. So, I mean, they do have some interesting blue line prospects coming up that, obviously he would create to compete with for spots here in the next few years. But still, it's a situation where the Kings, I think from a fit perspective, just looking at what he brings to the ice and could he help this team, I think there would be a fit that way. Now, there's also a lot of veteran leaders there that could probably, help kind of curb his off-ice antics and kind of keep things in check. Obviously, a really solid leadership group is going to be important to kind of make sure that nothing gets disrupted and drama doesn't ensue. Looking at the Kings roster, though, for a contract that maybe they could send back the other way to the Rangers, like on a 1 year left, there's really not a lot there that really jumps out at you. All of their contracts that have an extended time left would be some of their veteran guys like a Brown or Carter, Kopitar, and obviously players like that are not going to be involved here. So I would think that the Kings would have a case here to be, in contention and might want to do this deal. But if they do, I would suspect that they would probably want to move out maybe a prospect or a draft pick or something like that. It's going to have to be something like that. I don't think there's really much on the roster that would really work. They may want the Rangers to do a little bit of a salary retention, hard to say, but I do see a scenario here where LA could be a player for DeAngelo's services. Now, looking at the Anaheim Ducks next, I think the Ducks could be a terrific fit, actually. Looking at their blue line here, of course, you got Cam Fowler, you've got Hampus Lindholm. You have a lot of guys in shorter-term contracts as well. Of course, you got Josh Manson. Of course, he's out right now. So looking at this blue line, I do see a fit here that Anaheim could certainly benefit from his services. Now, from what I've heard in different places, looking around at who's talking about the DeAngelo situation, I think the Ducks might be kind of a front runner here. Would they want to consider maybe moving the final year of the David Backes contract? Now, when they took David Backes on, obviously from the Bruins, he's already been through waivers earlier in the year. The money he makes compared to DeAngelo is not all that drastically different. There could be some salary retained either way. The Rangers could get, just the final year of Backes, where the Ducks would take on the remainder of DeAngelo, and it very well could end up being a decent fit there. I mean, looking at what they need and obviously what could work, I do see a scenario here where the Anaheim Ducks could actually make a lot of sense for a Tony DeAngelo acquisition. But of course, the bigger question in all of this is, do these teams really want to take on this project? Do they want to take the chance that, he does learn from his mistakes, that he does kind of clean up his act and keep things, strictly on the ice and not be an off-ice distraction? Only time will tell. But based on, like I said, what guys are saying, like Dreger and McKenzie and other sources that we're referring to here, they seem to think there's a fair bit of interest. These are the 4 teams that are in there as of right now. So, of course, doesn't mean that other teams won't jump into the mix and decide to make a pitch here to the Rangers after all. But I do see where it makes a lot of sense for the Rangers to not want to retain too much salary or to take back a contract that's, anything really bad longer term. Like, for example, I know there was Louis Eriksson in Vancouver, for example. He still has another year left on that contract, so I just don't see any scenario where the Rangers would take that. So I'm sorry, Vancouver fans, but getting DeAngelo would not get you rid of Louis Eriksson's deal, so that's likely not going to happen either as well. So the Rangers have some options. A buyout would be relatively cheap, so we will see, but I would not be surprised if, based on what we're hearing, if a trade does come together sometime in the next few days. So let me know which one you think is the best scenario for DeAngelo out of these 4 options, or if there's other teams out there you think make a lot of sense and should take a chance. Give me your mock trades down below in the comments and we can discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.